No, alright. I know that sounds bad.
But I need you to understand something. My favorite area in Hollow Knight is also Deepnest for mainly the same reasons. That's why I was so sad when I realized Silksong doesn't have a good enough Deepnest equivalent to it. There are a couple options, but honestly I don't really want to compare all the Hollow Knight equivalents in the game. I do, however, want to talk about this beautiful area, Bilewater. You see, both Bilewater and Deepnest make the player feel so horrible, but they do it in such different ways, and that's what I want to talk about today, the difference between the two. Let's start with the ambiance. Deepnest has two main factors I want to focus on. Lower light is pretty self-explanatory, harder to see enemies coming, which requires more reaction timing, which keeps you on your toes. The sounds are a little bit more interesting. Some of them closely resemble the sound of spiders crawling, which is pretty similar to the sounds made by the enemies in Deepnest. Not only does this make it harder to know when an enemy is coming at you, but more importantly, it makes it so you don't know when an enemy isn't coming at you, and that keeps the players on their toes as well. In contrast, Bilewater doesn't use ambiance nearly as much to its advantage. There's definitely a mood to the area, but the ambiance isn't messing with the player in any way that's notable. Bilewater instead has the most delicious sludge ever made, muck maggots, which I will be calling sludge for the duration of this video. We both know how sludge works. It's pretty annoying. There isn't much to say about it on its own, but it does pair well with the enemies in Bilewater. I won't be talking about all the enemies, just the ones that are particularly annoying, that being these guys. These guys are annoying mainly because they leave after attacking you. Most enemies stay in the game, which gives you the ability to gain silk from attacking them if they get you by surprise. But since these guys jump out of the game after attacking you, the player isn't going to be able to get silk to reheal without rushing, and rushing leads to mistakes, which lead to more damage, which means they need to get even more silk. There's also these enemies that can hit you into the sludge, and they go back into the sludge where you can't get hit, so they're almost twice as bad if it wasn't for them kind of being in infinite silk farm. Pair that with the sludge, which already limits your silk by a lot, and with a bunch of different traps that aren't caused by enemies, so you don't even have the option to regain silk there, and it turns Bilewater into an area that tries to take away your silk at every single possible mistake you make. And since the sludge stays on you until you bind, and that prevents you from healing, Bilewater becomes completely focused on draining you of all your silk. Draining. That's a good way of describing how Bilewater feels. On the other hand, Deepnest enemies add to the lack of knowledge that the area has been focusing on. Enemies that come from underground and the foreground catching you off guard, along with them that come from dead bodies, which also catch you off guard. They all add to Deepnest constantly keeping you on your toes. It's almost like Deepnest is trying to toy with you. Even the area's only boss is a misdirection. The whole area is playing with you. Bilewater focuses a lot more on punishing you severely. Deepnest focuses more on punishing you more often. The perfect example of this is the floor of both. Bilewater's ground has the sludge, and Deepnest's ground can break into spikes if you're not careful. One is a worse fate, and one you're more likely to fall into. I think a really good way of defining the two is that Bilewater is actively trying to push you out by punishing you, while Deepnest is trying to keep you in so it can mess with you. And nothing exemplifies this more than how you leave the two areas. Bilewater's exits are easily acceptable, and unless you can find a hidden bench, that is where you're going to be when you die. The area is constantly showing you a way out and telling you to leave it, while Deepnest is trying to make you stay. There's an area in Deepnest that the average player will use as their escape on their first playthrough, and it's a pretty annoying escape. Upon getting up here, the moment the player leaves, and they're right back into Deepnest. Pretty funny, huh? It is actually possible to dodge this, but that's assuming that the player knew that the floor is going to break underneath them, and of course they're not going to know that. And the last thing that Deepnest does to keep you in is this bench. Although this area seems like it's the only calm area in Deepnest, since the game autosaves, sitting on this bench really only saves your position, which means now you're actually trapped in Deepnest. But a player falling into this area after experiencing Deepnest will automatically go to it, and therefore screw themselves over, which is kind of a cool idea. Anyways, point is that Deepnest and Bilewater both suck, but Deepnest toys with you and Bilewater tries to drain you. Both in actuality by draining your silk and in overly punishing you, which is why these are both my favorite areas in the entire game.